Anybody from the Arctic? Nope. No, no representation there. We'll reach there soon. Maybe
British
maybe
Columbia,
2.0.
Canada.
Okay, slightly concerning because I think we're live on YouTube, but I am seeing like a red little restream error. So just give me a second to double check that on another device, and then we'll kick things off properly here.
Yeah, we'll keep vamping, just reading off places where people are from.
Well, I did this amazing. Wow, that's a very close headshot. Don't know how that happened. Um, no, I did this like terrific live stream with Abby uh, a few months ago, but for some reason the live stream failed and Zoom didn't capture it. And I really don't want that to happen again today for such a special event. So give me a couple of minutes here to see if I can get this up and running.
Tyler claims that YouTube is working.
I saw it live for a second, but when I play it, it's turned into like a video recording already. So,
Hmm.
okay, I think we're live. I just checked and it seems like we're live.
Sweet.
And I'll record it on Zoom as a backup. Okay. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Better to take a few moments to get that up and running than be sorry about it later. We have 108 people in the chat right now here on Zoom. It's amazing to have you. If you're here on Zoom, the best thing about this is that you can interact in the chat and we can say hello, we can look at your questions, you can guide a little bit what we talk about. We do, of course, though, have a full stop agenda for you today, though, because there's really just one topic. Mastra 1.0, Mastra 1.0, Mastra 1.0. We just announced the 1.0 stable version, and we've been doing a lot of fun activities this week to spread the word, tell you what's new, and this workshop is no exception. We're gonna I'm joined today by a few different guests. We have Daniel, Eric, and Leonard. I'll introduce you to them properly in just a moment. And these are some of the engineers behind the features present in 1.0, and they're each going to present a little bit about them. And I'll chime in a little bit too with some updates. Before we kick things off and get into the educational side of this workshop, and remember, Master Workshops are all about getting hands-on with code, very practical, and we definitely want your questions as well to make sure it's as valuable as possible to you as well. Before jumping into all that, I just want to recap some of the things we've been doing this week around the launch. The first thing is the announcement post by Sam. You can check this out on the blog where we go into detail about these specific changes as well as the story behind 1.0. And we also have some easy kind of commands you can copy to either start a new project or migrate your existing project. We were also on Hacker News and we got 196 points. These threads are amazing because the conversation really gets stoked and we get to hear a lot of interesting perspectives about building agents and users' experience with Mastra. I also made this new intro video about Mastra. I've only been at Mastra for 6 months. The original demo video that Shane made is such a polished presentation, by the way, and he did it in one take. It's just remarkable to watch this old video a year later and like see how much the brand has changed and most notably the dashboard. It looks like a different product almost. You can even see the sort of Veet fav icon in the tab. We've made a lot of polishing and refinement since then. And so we wanted to record like a new demo to show things off properly. It's a really exciting time at Mastra. We have some quite successful and impressive teams using Mastra. Here are a few of them. And a lot of dev tools, by the way, when a company like signs up to their product, they put that on their homepage. They're like, oh, they're a user. But in our case, we literally have like case studies for these different users. And we're not doing it to sell anybody anything necessarily. These are like really interesting case studies about the problems these teams faced building agents, the same kind of problems you might. And they talk about how they use Mastra to solve some of those. So our case studies are like a bit educational, as well as, of course, showing off some bigger customers using us. On the open source side, we're at just over 300,000 weekly downloads, which is really impressive growth. I don't know if you know, you probably do, but Mastra is created by the team behind Gatsby. And in just 1 year, Mastra has exceeded Gatsby's NPM growth that they achieved in 5 years. And so it's off to a neck breaking pace speed. On the open source side, we have over 300 contributors, and of course, you're welcome to get involved as well. Did you know that in the Mastra monorepo, we also have the docs project? So if you want to get involved in a small way by contributing docs updates or something like that, you'd be very welcome to. And in fact, Leonard and I here on this call are the most likely to help you and review your pull requests. So we would love to see you. And then, of course, we also have oh yes, we have, let me see, 19,589 stars as of an hour ago. If I reload the page, it goes up to 71. And so we've almost at 20k stars and it's climbing quite quickly. If you would like to help us reach our goal of 20k stars on GitHub, you can just head over to the Mastra mono repo here and drop us a star. We are here to bring you value. That's the number one reason we're hosting this workshop. And we want to show you some features that you're going to find useful and tell you the story behind them so you can understand them better. There is just one thing, and we don't usually do this, but there is one thing I would like to ask you at the top end of this workshop. We're currently on product hunts, and in the second position, we're on the tails of number one. And while we don't love to ask for anything, it would be so helpful if you could go to Product Hunt and give us a cheeky upvote. This is going to help us more than you know as we reach new users beyond just the Master community and the dev tools communities and things we're part of. There's a lot of product orientated people on Product Hunt, of course, that we think could benefit a lot from Master. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to post a link to this in the chat, and perhaps you can take just a quick moment out of your day to give us an upvote. Thank you so much. So today we're going to be talking about Mastra 1.0. I'm inviting a few different guests to talk about each of these individually, and I'm pretty stoked to go around the table and share some things with you. We're joined by Leonard, who's going to talk to us about the bundling improvements that have happened in recent months, as well as Mastra's new server adapters. Eric is going to give us an overview of observability and share some updates along the way. Daniel is going to touch on processors, and I'm going to give you a quick preview of composite storage and a feature which is not technically part of Master 1.0, but I think you would like to know about. It's called agent approval, and we'll share that with you at the end. Who are we? Well, first of all, not that it's too important, but I'm your host, Alex. I focus on developer education here at Mastra. I'm joined today by Leonard. Hey, Leonard, how's it going?
Hi everyone, nice that so many people joined here and excited to talk about some of the new features we all shipped.
Leonard was previously at Clerk, Netlify, and Gatsby, and they do all kinds of things that are helpful at Mastra, including docs and education and looking after a lot of our open source related issues as well. I'm excited to get into the bundling improvements in just a second here. We're also joined by Eric, who was previously at DataStax, Cascada, and ReturnPath. Eric, maybe you can say hello and tell us a bit about what you do at Mastra.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Glad to see everyone on the webinar. I primarily focus on observability. I started at Mastra about 5 months ago and been focusing on basically rebuilding the entire observability stack and all the tracing improvements that you've seen over the past few months. And I'll talk about that more in a bit.
I can't wait. And finally, we're joined by Daniel. Daniel, I think you're the only person who's been on one of these workshops before. So perhaps folks watching who come regularly, you might recognize Daniel. They were previously at Netlify and Gatsby as well. Maybe, Daniel, you can remind people a bit about what you do at Mastra and what you're excited about.
Yeah, every now and again I have to remind myself what I do. No, but I work a lot in the agentic loop, so working with like processors, tools, memory, a bunch of other things that are escaping my mind right now, but essentially touching a lot of MCP, touching a lot of different pieces that affect agents. And yeah, excited to show what we've been cooking.
That's right. We did a workshop on MCP, remember? And we did one on guardrails as well, which is, I guess, a
Yeah.
subcategory of processors.
Seems like years ago, but I'm sure it was like 2 months ago. Years in AI time.
That's right. Dog years and AI years, they're just different, aren't they? Okay, maybe we can pass it over to you, Leonard. You can tell us a bit about what to expect from your segment and take us through some interesting stuff. And in the meantime, I'll keep a close eye on the chat in case people have any questions.
Okay, cool. So I won't monitor the chat while I present, but I will do afterwards, and then we can surely do questions afterwards too. So, as Alex said, I want to talk about server adapters today. And before we come to that, I want to explain how we got there, like why we created them, why we saw the need for them, or also why we saw that users might like them. So when you create a master project, for example, with our create CLI, it's just the master project. It's just this source folder with the index file and your agents and whatnot. You could run this on your own as a server, but people are integrating Mastra into their Next.js site, into their own server, in their own setup. And what we've seen is that in monorepos, it was kind of like playing whack-a-mole with some edge cases here and there, because before we made some bundling improvements, Mastra tried to bundle everything that you used throughout your monorepo. So for example, in this app here, I'm importing another file from this shared package here. And then also in the weather agent, I'm importing the prompt also from this shared package. As you can see, this is just TypeScript, so we don't compile anything here. And this all works, but we saw users struggling with that in more complicated setups, because when you then build the server, you get this .mastra folder. You might have seen that in when you investigated your own output. And under the hood, we use rollup to bundle this Mastra index file, and everything that gets bundled into it lands here. One of the improvements we made now is that every package, we don't try to bundle it anymore. We just let npm do the job. So for example, this here is defined in the shared package, and we don't try to bundle it anymore. So these are the bundling improvements we made. However, this can only go so far. There will surely be edge cases here and there for monorepos, and we wanted to give you another option to run Mastra alongside your app that you might already have. And this is where server adapters come in. So when I switch to the screen here, I use the Hono create command to create a basic Hono app here. And after I did that, I initialized Mastra with the with the Mastra init command, and then it also created the default template with the weather agent and so on that you know. So in the past, before server adapters, people had to re-implement all the different handlers they might want to have in their custom app. Might that be Hono, Express, or any other server app they use. But now with server adapters, we give you, as the name suggests, an easy way to integrate Mastra into your existing server. So for the case of Hono, you have to install the @mastra/Hono app, and then you define these types on the Hono generic here. And then these two lines are important here. You initialize a new Mastra server, pass your existing Mastra instance to this server, and then you init. Under the hood, init adds a bunch of middleware to your existing server, and depending on where you init in this file here, behavior will change. You can read more about that in the documentation, which I will show in just a second. So, as people say, show don't tell, so we will do that. I started the Hono app here, so that's running on port 3000. And we defined this index route, hello world. Then we defined this docs route and then a custom route. But now, so this is the hello world route. Let's make this a little bigger here. But now, all the APIs that you get from Mastra Dev, for example, or Mastra Start, they now also all exist in your Hono app. So we can ask for the weather agent here, or we can ask for the weather, our favorite query here. And this asks the API agent's weather agent generate endpoint. So that's the endpoint that we generate by default anyway, but now it's integrated into your existing Hono app here. And since I said it's important where you define this init here, you can see in this custom route here that now in the context of Hono, you can access Mastra. So in addition to the routes that we expose by default, you can now more easily integrate Mastra into custom routes you might want to have. So, how do you learn more about this? You go to our docs and then go to the server adapters page. And here you will learn more about when you might use it. So as I explained, I really recommend using it if you're using one of the servers that we support anyway. It just makes sense. Or if you have run into problems in your monorepo, for example. Right now, we have pre-built packages for Express, Hono, Fastify, and Koa. However, if you go to the custom adapters documentation here, you can implement your own server. Be that for your bespoke implementation or for one of the many open source server frameworks. If you feel like it, please contribute to our open source repo, and then we can add it, and then everyone can use it. I think as a closing note, I would highlight that here in the initialization flow, you can read more about the importance where you place this init call. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I will take a look at the chat now if I can find it.
I can help you a little bit.
Yeah.
Daniel asked if there, not our Daniel, but a Daniel, another person named Daniel asked if there are also server adapters for Next.js, and if that makes sense.
Okay. So for Next.js, what you can do is go to, for example, to our quick start guide of Next.js. And since Next.js allows you to create the API routes, and you're most probably integrating Mastra into a chat application, what I would recommend is following this guide here that basically explains to you how you can use from our AI SDK package, how you can use these two helper functions here to implement AI SDK compatible chat stream. both for post and get. So there won't be a server adapter for Next.js because they have these API routes by default already, and you can use our AI SDK package to implement compatible formats here. I hope that cleared up the question. If not, please ask again.
I think you'll like these questions, Leonard, because both Ian and Phil are curious about how do you use Studio when using server adapters.
Yeah, that's a good question. So since in this example app here, you initialized Mastra like you already did, so you can start the Mastra dev as you know and expect, and then you can use the Studio as you used to. So you can use it in parallel with your existing Express app.
Awesome. This has been brilliant. Thank you, Leonard.
Any more questions? I'm scrolling through here.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's move
Okay.
on to Eric and observability. And if anybody has questions, they can write it in the chats. And the really cool thing about this particular workshop with all four of us here is that we might be able to answer you in the chats asynchronously while presenting at the same time. Well, Eric, how about I'm actually very curious. I know that when you joined Mastra, it was to overhaul observability. There's been a lot of observability related updates going into and then 1.0. Maybe you can tell us the sort of story, like where this all started with, like where did Mastra's observability start? Where is it now and where is it going? And the more demos and code and stuff you can show us along the way, well, we would sure love that.
Yep, sounds good. So let me start. When I first started using Mastra, it was at another firm when I was still working at DataStax. And I started playing with Mastra. I really loved the studio environment, the playground environment for debugging things, but I found that the observability and the tracing was really lacking. The traces showed things, but it wasn't my code. It was like the internal Mastra code, and it wasn't really helpful for debugging at all. So I started working, even when I was at DataStax, on a sort of replacement of the observability stack. And then when I joined Mastra full time, I basically had ripped out the old system, the old OTel-based system, and then rebuilt a new system, a custom solution.
Yeah, what's your
I
beef with OTel?
So OTel is really great for requests that happen relatively quickly, like say like within 30 seconds or so, where and it's for like API requests or database queries and things, like where like 30 seconds is like a terrible response rate. The thing with OTel is you can't actually ship the data to the server or ship it to look at locally in a UI until the span completes, until the process completes. So if the request is really quick, that's not an issue because it's faster than a human can react and look at it. But for AI, when you have agents sometimes running for minutes or even hours, and you want to see what's going on and be able to debug what's going on, it's very important to be able to ship data, both like when you start a request, in the middle of a request, and at the end of the request. So that's why we moved away from OTel as like the main implementation for observability. But we do still support OTel if you're using it. So I'm going to share a screen and talk through some things. So first, just wanted to show the main documentation page. It starts here off the top with the overview. The thing I really wanted to highlight is all the different exporters we have. So the default exporter, this is one of the two that are configured by default if you do create Mastra. This is what persists the traces to the local storage when you're running locally, or like if you're using an external database that will persist to that. The cloud one would send your traces directly to our cloud system. You have to enable your Mastra Cloud API key to get that. But the really nice thing is we work with all these third-party providers as well. Rise, Braintrust, Datadog, Laminar, Langfuse, Langsmith, PostHug, Sentry, and then OpenTelemetry, which supports a bunch of additional providers by default, but any system that supports OpenTelemetry, as long as you don't mind waiting for your process to complete, you can view your data there. There's also this OTel telemetry bridge. So this is more like for if you have your app is just not a Mastra app entirely, but you have like a bunch of processes already built and you're adding Mastra in, and you just want Mastra to work with your existing OpenTelemetry setup, and then you should use the OpenTelemetry bridge instead of the external exporters. In this documentation, there's a ton of configuration. There's a bunch of different things you can do. You can go through this on your own. There's also specific documentation for all the different exporters and bridges and processors. I wanted to move it over into an example. So I just wanted to show, in my package JSON, I'm going to show in GitHub just so I don't have to keep flopping windows back and forth. This is like the default install of 1.0 with the create Mastra. Then I added, I'm going to be a little silly here. I'm going to export to a bunch of different things at once, but so I added the Arise package, Braintrust, all these additional observability packages. And then I have a setup here where I'm building an agent that's going to call other agents. Also, I have some prompts that are like huge to show prompt caching and have some tools built. But this whole thing basically just generates stories about spaceships. So there's a tool, a agent that generates the number of characters we want to create. There's an agent that creates character names. There's a agent that makes spaceship names, and then there's something that just builds the story altogether. Wanted to highlight the config. So just like in Create Mastra, there's this observability block. The normal default would just have the default exporter and the cloud exporter, but I've added all these additional ones, and all these exporters work with basically zero config. So as long as you have your environment variables configured for the different providers, you just say, I want a new post-hoc app exporter. I want a new exporter. There's nothing else you have to do. There's additional options you want to set specialist features, but for the most part, you can just do zero config, which is really nice for getting going and getting started. Here's my agent that has the sub-agents and tools. And it's anything else I want to show here. Oh yeah, and then these are just my giant prompts. When I was trying to experiment with prompt caching, your prompt has to actually be over 2,500 tokens to even have a chance of being cached at Anthropic. So this is the studio. I'll go into the agent. This agent actually doesn't take any user input, so I just tell it to go. Again, so this is starting some things. This will be traced that's simultaneously on all these different exporters. So in the system, it's creating events for all the different things that are happening, and then it's splitting those events and firing them out and distributing them to all the different exporters simultaneously. I'll just let this continue for a minute. So we generated a ship name, and now we're generating some characters in parallel and figure out some relationship information. And we can, even as this is going, we can hop over to Langfuse and I refresh, and we already have an existing trace even though it hasn't finished. So this is the live debuggability that's really nice. If we look at the timeline of the events happening and things happening in parallel. Back to Studio. Okay, so here's our final story about our spaceship. In Mastra Studio itself, we can hop over to the observability tab. This is the built-in default observability. So I can look at this one I just ran. This is an overview of the trace. If I click, I think these buttons, those will show the full expanded trace. There's a few bugs at the moment, like these are internal workings that should not be showing, so ignore those. That will be fixed in the very near future. You have a timeline of all the different steps that's happening. Let's jump into like this LM call to Claude Sonnet. And then you can click on that and get more details. This is the input message, this is the output, there's some metadata, token usages. Jumping over to length views just to show, let's get the update here now that it's completed. And length views, let's try to find that same call to Claude. Let's find a different one that actually maybe got cache tokens. Here, so you can see that we wrote into the cache with this many tokens, so you get like a proving that we're actually using token caching. And here's in Brain Trust. Display the timeline, including tag support. Yeah, so tag of spaceships. Here's laminar. Press to get the most recent run. So that's mostly what I wanted to show. So observability up to now has just been tracing. The next thing we're going to start adding in the very near future are metrics. So gathering like the sums of tokens used across all your different models, try to track costs, try to track time usage. Also, we're going to work on having data sets and experiments. Are there any questions that have come up?
There was one question about the relationship between this and evals and how that works.
So that's something that isn't so well defined yet, but that's going to be our focus one of the focuses over the next few months. In sort of an ideal world, you can run evals on traces or spans and get scores of your data from the data that's stored in the trace. And then once we have data sets with like test cases for your system, as you make changes in the system, we can automatically run your agent across the data set with the old version and the new version, and then run your evals on the traces from the old and the new. And then you can get scores out numerically comparing the difference between the old and the new to see if your changes made an improvement. So that's coming in the near future.
I'm really excited about that. I gave a talk about evals and scorers recently, and it's just the more you go into what we have so far, the opportunity becomes a bit more obvious, and all these things could play together in such a really lovely way, I think.
Yep. Also like prompt tuning, trying different prompts or experimenting with different prompts and trying to see right away if it makes an improvement, especially since we have everything in Mastra. It's not like you're working with this third-party tool, like we control all the pieces. Then we can really build this system to iterate and improve sort of automatically. So it's really exciting to get to that soon. But the other thing I wanted to say is like we have a bunch of these exporters at the moment. If you're using some other system and you want to make another contribution for another exporter, we're really happy to accept contributions. New exporter contributions are wonderful. You can reach out to me, ePinzer at GitHub. I can show you everything to get going. I can hop on a Zoom with you if you want to build something up. Really happy to help.
That's such a generous offer. That's awesome. I wanted to, in the original sort of table of contents for this workshop, we mentioned composite storage. It's a really natural sort of segue from observability into composite storage. And I'll give a very quick overview before passing it over to Daniel. If you have been using Mastra, you're probably quite used to passing in a store like this. For example, when you create your Mastra instance, you pass the default store to the storage property. And here we're just constructing a new libsql store. And of course, there are a bunch of different stores. We have Postgres and every pretty much every database you can imagine, right? And Eric, I'm curious if you want to chime in at any point, because my understanding is that previously you'd be using this single database, this libsql store for almost everything. So your workflow snapshots, your message history, and also your observability traces. But the data requirements for storing message history, which is like frequently accessed compared to storing, and maybe quite small, compared to accessing traces, which you access less frequently and can be enormous, right? As you collect a bunch of traces over time, they have such different requirements. You probably want to use different databases for each of them in a production system. There
Yes,
wasn't a
absolutely. Well, actually, you probably should not be using libsql in production, but let's say you're maybe using Postgres in production for your message store. But even
valid point.
Postgres will get quickly overwhelmed by our production observability system. So that's why one of the reasons this composite storage exists now, so that you can define different storage providers for different parts of the system. I think our
That's right.
recommendation in general would be try to use ClickHouse or other columnar stores for observability, and then more relational databases for other parts of the system.
Very familiar, similar interface. It's just that you create a composite store, you provide a default store, so everything goes to libsql in this case, except for when you override by giving a domain such as observability its own store. You can also come in here and add other domains like workflows, for example. And then rather than pass just the default store, we'll pass the composite store. And now just like that, Mastra will send the data to ClickHouse. I'm not like a big data guy. I'm not too smart about these tools, but I did sign up to ClickHouse for the first time just to show you. And you can see that this is all funneled over to the observability traces are funneled over to ClickHouse. And I'm sure you can imagine how you might use other databases designed for big data. There is one quick question that looks a bit juicy, Eric. I think we should answer it and then we
Yeah.
can move on to Daniel.
I can respond to this question from Tiny Talk about like why do we move away from OTel? And the initial reason was to this like idea about trying to be able to view your traces as they are created. And they ask about like what happens when OTel catches up and allows shipping traces earlier on. Um, it's very possible we would move to OTel at that point, but um, what I showed in LangFuse, for example, that's being exported via custom native exporter that's directly using the LangFuse API. Similarly with BrainTrust, we're directly using the BrainTrust API and not using OTel to send to those platforms so that we can get the real-time view. Also, a lot of the exporters have like very specific customizations that are not accessible via their OTel exportation at the moment. So using this custom system, we can really like build out all the custom features of all the different exporters, all the different platforms, and provide data to them. I think that's, yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Eric. And thank you for preparing that demo. I want to check out that example as well. It's a really creative idea. So, Daniel, this is actually an education for me as well as everybody watching, and I'm very interested to learn a bit more. It's just that in the what's new section in the announcement, uh, processor system overhaul is mentioned, and I'm kind of curious what that means. And there's something to do with tripwires as well, that maybe you can touch on throughout the course of your presentation.
Hmm.
What are you going to teach us about?
Yeah, I mean, first we have a question I'll just answer quickly, unrelated to this. Joe Ruddy asked about supporting agent skills, and I'll just say yes, we are planning on supporting that. That, along with a bunch of other things, are coming out in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, and so I'm going to talk a bit about processors. And so let me just share my screen. Yeah, let me just pull the processor documentation. So in in zero dot X, uh, we ship processors kind of um, without thinking of kind of the system as a whole, just kind of thinking about, okay, you have the processor interface, you can execute the processor as is, but didn't think about how it would work in kind of a more complex system. So as users kind of outgrew that initial implementation of processors, we kind of went back to the drawing board to think about like, okay, how can we extend it? How can we improve it? And how can we make it scale better and be and improve the DX around it? And so there was a few. There was kind of a lot of different pieces here and there. So I'll try to walk through each of them. Feel free to stop me at any point to ask some questions if I skip over or leave some blanks. Essentially, so when we first started processors, we just had this process input. So you attach a processor to an agent. And so if you attach a processor with this that implements this function, it would process your input right at the start of the execution flow. And then we also had this process output stream, which on the way out after the LLM response, it would process each chunk individually. So the chunk would get sent to the processor. And then we also had this process output result, which does what it sounds like. At the end, you can process the final result. And so there were some gaps there that we needed to fill. Essentially, we added these two new steps here. So we have process input step and process output step. So now we can write a processor or a processor flow that every step hits the processor. And so we don't have to, for instead of just at once at the start of the execution flow, we can intercept each step of the agentic loop, either on going in or going out. So now we have these five different processor functions that you can implement. So that covers our bases there for kind of the agentic loop, being able to hook into different parts of it. And so here, maybe I'll post this to the chat if you want to have a look through that. So that was kind of the first step. The next one is that uh, if you have used processors before, you're aware that processors have the capability of aborting. And so let's take for an example, I'm going to just let me just make sure I'm in the right directory. I'm just going to spin up a server and just visually show you. And so this is something that's new as well. We've added in this processors tab to be able to play around with your processors some more. So let's, I think this one here. So this one has a processor. So if I say something like, I hate you, it has a processor that detects like harmful content. It's a processor we provide out of the box that you could use, a moderation processor. And so we added in this UI here to kind of show what's going on. We added the ability to add metadata as well and show what processor uh, this is coming from. And so uh, the issue here is that what we were seeing is tripwires weren't being bubbled up. And so if you had a workflow that used an agent inside of it, it wouldn't have returned a tripwire. And so we've
Daniel,
added this. Yeah,
what is a tripwire?
it's just it's basically just aborting. It's to distinguish from an error. So there's different ways to like it's essentially like bailing like early from this execution and returning some information to let you know the reason why it errored or it stopped isn't because of
Oh,
anything like it's just a different category of ending a response.
so like an error might be catastrophic and unrecoverable, but a tripwire gives you a chance to like course correct if it's to do with
Yeah,
like exceeding the token usage
it's
or
like an
something.
expected error. It's
Oh,
like
something
an
okay.
abort or
that you've
something.
like yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to say that you should be able to see this also in the traces in observability. So if you'll be able to see this information if like a system failed.
Yeah,
Hopefully
so
it's
you
showing
should be
it.
able to see tripwire somewhere here.
Uh,
Maybe not this step. Is it?
it
Oh, it would
may
probably be here.
it may be actually broken at the moment with this internal stuff, but we'll get this fixed soon.
Doing it live. Um, so if you go to the processors tab here, now we also have a way to test each individual processor. And so you'll see it tells you what phases you've implemented or functions you've implemented. So like this one here is only implemented in output step. This one does the input, the output stream, and the output result. And so if I click into this, I could run the processor, see the results here. Um, I could, I think this will make it trigger a tripwire. And so, yeah, so you could test out your processors here and you could see the results here. Um, Another thing is that some of these processors are well, okay, I'll take a step back. So I've kind of showed just kind of the like a singular processor. So it's like you want to do like moderation or you want to detect like PII or check for whatever else. Another thing that we've added in is that uh, so we got a lot of questions about people asking, how do you run processors in parallel? So what people were seeing is that processors would run sequentially. And so one processor would check to make sure it followed these rules. The next processor would check to make it sure it followed these rules. But they didn't really need to be run sequentially. They could have been run in parallel. So we're getting a lot of questions like, okay, how do we run this in parallel? How do we get more control over this? And so our solution to that is just to reuse primitives that you're used to already and that exist. And so we've added a way that you can wrap a processor in create step. And so the same thing, we allow this for like tools and agents as the steps. So now you can have a processor as a step. So you could actually write a workflow in the same way for processors, in the same way that you would write a workflow for anything else. And so I'm running these three processors in parallel, doing some mapping, running some final step. And so you can, there's a lot of control over the flow. And so yeah, there's other things here. You can do like branching, and anything that workflow supports, you can do this as well. And so and you can attach this to agents just like you would any other processor. And so you can, yeah, just drop in your workflow here, and it accepts a workflow or a singular processor as well. And so the UI, because of that, these ones here that I was showing you are singular processors. If I go back here and click on one of the ones that are workflows, I can view it as a workflow now. So now basically getting with processors, I get everything that workflows gives you for free. And so I can test it out here. Let's run this. And so now I can see a tripwire. I can go here, see the reason metadata, the processor ID, and things like that. And everything that comes with workflows, like every new feature we add to workflows is going to be available to this processor workflow as well. Um, and then just another UI thing. So with agents, when you attach processors to them now, you will see the processors here. And what's nice here is that under the hood, we convert all the processors you pass into either input or output processors, and that becomes in a workflow as well. So if I click here, I basically see I can test out how it would be for the actual agent workflow for the processor. So because I just added so let me let me show you the code for this so you can get a better idea. Um, which one is this? This is, yeah, so this one here, I just pass these two input processors to it. And so automatically, if I pass an array, it will run it sequentially. So I get this here and I can run my processors. So there's two ways to test your processors. You can test them out individually, or you can test them out as a workflow attached to the agent that they're attached to. You can also go through the different uh, this moderation processor, every agent I attach this to could technically have different configuration. And so I can pick different configuration for this processor as well. There's also a bunch of other cool things that we've added. Let me just show you one quick. Are we doing okay with time?
We have about 4 minutes scheduled, and I'd love to take a couple of questions before we wrap up.
Okay, I'll just show you this one quick. So I'd mentioned before we added uh, a process input step and a process output step. And so what this means is that now you can basically on the fly change your tools, change your models, change a lot of different configuration. Basically anything here can be changed on the fly per step. And so this is an example, I'll paste it in the chat, but essentially using process input step to recreate Anthropic's tool search tool. You can do other things like I can select my model here, and so I can do something like const model, uh, get it from some third-party system, maybe like pass my prompt and have some sort of model router here. So every step it can change what model I use based off of the prompt. Then I can just return it here. So there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with processors now. And kind of the last thing I mentioned is that all of our memory, uh, our whole memory implementation has been moved to processors under the hood. And so now you can actually so something like working memory, I could do something like this and configure it that way and have more control over all of the memory features. And we have a lot of cool stuff coming out. Stay tuned. I know I jammed a lot in there, but trying to get through this.
Daniel, you already know what I'm going to say. We'll have to do a dedicated workshop to this at some point in the future. Can I quickly show agent approval while you answer those questions in the chat, Daniel?
Yeah, for sure.
I just think this is too cool not to mention. It's not technically part of like the 1.0 release, but it kind of snuck in somewhere along the way, I think. And so if you go to Studio and run the default weather agent, this is just the quickest way to test it and use agent approval. The default weather agent has this get weather tool. And normally if you ask about the weather, in London, it'll just run la-di-da. Nope, I'm lying. Apparently it does. I didn't realize that saves between restarts. That's interesting. Well, had I not checked this box already, it would run la-di-da. And then we have this option to require tool approval. So when this box is checked, you'll see the behavior here where it asks you to approve or decline. If you decline, it reports the tool call was not approved by the user. That's the result of the tool call, which is very clever because then the model can generate its response based on this information, like it knows what happened. And then, of course, if we ask about the weather in Berlin, for example, I'm going to approve the tool call, it will run just like so. So traditionally with Mastra, our best sort of construct for doing human in the loop was via workflows. But since tools are that kind of critical inflection point where the model reaches out to the outside world, it was so natural to add this tool approval step to agents. It's implemented and easily, experimented with in Studio. The code is all documented should you want to call these, should you wish to implement tool call approval in your own projects. When you call stream and set required tool approval to true in the stream call, if the tool is called, the stream has a tool call approval chunk type that you can check on to determine if approval is required. And when you call generate, it's slightly different. Basically, it will return an output with an approval property that you need to check in order to then resume the workflow based on some future user input. And the really cool thing about this, which we don't have time to show as well, is using a fairly similar API, you can implement this kind of approval with agent networks. So you have a bit more control there as well. Just one little cherry on top for you all. And I think with that, it concludes, like we're at the top of the hour, and I think it pretty much perfectly concludes. I'm sad for this stream to end. I've had such a good time, and it's been so fun getting to celebrate the 1.0 launch with you all. I once again hate to be a pain, but if you do have a moment to either star us on GitHub or check out the launch on Product Hunt, we would really appreciate your help. It helps support us more than you might realize. Eric, Daniel, Leonard, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you everybody else for tuning in as well. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.